probably recognized the importance of the partnership early in my career, probably one of my first or second fires where we put the fire out. And of course, usually there are quite a few victims. And I just remember, fires 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning. Within an hour, we have Red Cross on the scene, providing shelter, providing drinks, providing support. And it was just amazing to see these people out there doing that thing so quickly. Victims were not waiting hours. They were not waiting days. They were assisted within an hour. It seemed to me it was just so quick. It was surprising, and it was very, very good to witness.
Thanks. Yeah, I really have noticed the importance of partnerships because it really is a way for us and them to reach out to the community even more so. They have great relationships with the community. We can build on that and really collaborate. One of the other things I noticed when I first started with the Red Cross, I still do work on the DAT team. So we're seeing those partners at work in the middle of a traumatic situation. So it's nice to work with those partners, whether it's MIRA, whether it's the fire departments, the emergency management teams, or the police department, when it's calm. So when you're doing a sound the alarm event or when you're installing smoke alarms, you're engaging the community when there's not a traumatic situation, when they haven't just lost, maybe had the worst day of their lives. And there's a heightened sense of awareness of how difficult those situations are. But it's nice to be out there when we're installing smoke alarms and giving a preparedness education.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Ned. I'm gonna pivot back to my corporate days here for a minute, and it's too bad my boss Stan isn't listening here. But as you he's not but one of the things I learned early on in my career, I was in the technology space, right, with Symbol Technologies, Motorola and Zebra, was that as we were growing up as a company, we realized that selling direct wasn't going to get us to become a $4 billion company. And so one of the things that our chief marketing officer, Stan, was my boss at the time, talked about is, we talk about go to market in the corporate space, right? And so in order to go to market, you need to go through and with your partners. And you sell through distribution channels, you sell through value-added reseller channels, right, in the technology space. And that was something that was ingrained in us years and years and years as we grew up as an organization, where we actually changed the dynamic of the organization from 80% direct sales to 80% sales through the channel, right, our channel partners. And so coming here to the Red Cross, as I left that job, one of the early things that we looked at in the home fire program is, how are we going to go to market with this program that we have? And one of those things that were real obvious to me as we started this was that we needed to do it with and through our partners. And so, in there lies a lot of the partnerships that we've created and worked with partners over the years came from that.
Yeah, and I just want to sort of drill down on that a little bit, and you sort of are getting right into the next idea is, what's something that the Red Cross specifically benefits from that we get from partners? Like when you're doing home fire campaign, what is it specifically about a partner organization that allows us to do this work that we couldn't do without them?
There's a lot of benefits, right? There's benefits where, again, to use the old marketing analogy, right? There are the products and services that organizations have, and there are gaps in those product and services portfolios that they have. And same thing for the Red Cross. And so as we partner with some of these partners in the community, they're able to bring some of those gaps that we have in our service. They're able to partner with us to add more value to what they're doing in their own business, their own world, and their own community. And it continues to help, give the clients and residents the best kind of care that we can give them with complementary services when we go that way.
And Dario, I think you might have an interesting perspective on this from the overview as sort of the RDO, where you see all different aspects of the disaster cycle. Are there things, in different phases where partners are uniquely situated to be able to help us?
Yeah, 100%. And to start, I'll say, right, so how do we benefit? It's not about us, it's about the client, right? It's about the individual, it's about the public, the humans, right, that we serve. When we get together with other groups that are doing similar work, the beneficiary are those that we're serving, number one, right? So we have three parts of the cycle: prepare, response, recovery within the Red Cross, right, of this disaster cycle. In the preparedness side, I'll give you a tangible example. Partnering with FDNY, the most respected agency, right, in the business. The Red Cross, the most respected agency in our business, right? Together, we're able to reach so much more. From the beginning, instead of just installing a regular alarm, we said, we're going to install the catalog of alarms, as my predecessor called it. We're going to install that CO2, that smoke alarm that's going to save lives. And we're seeing it, right? 13 lives on Staten Island. That's huge, right? That is us at our best, right? Working together. They have the knowledge. We have the knowledge. Together, we bring it out. These two brands, these two groups that everybody trusts, right? So that's in the preparedness side. Not only that, but we partner with other organizations like Mira USA and Suchi Foundation, right? These are respectable organizations. Mira USA speaks Spanish, Suchi speaks Mandarin, right? So what happens is we get access to the people that may not be able to understand the language, English, right? So now we're getting to that population and serving them better. That's on the preparedness side. On the response side, I'll tell you an example where I'm a Latino. I speak Spanish, and when I'm out there and somebody lost their home, and I'm able to speak to them in their language and say, "Hey, I'm here. This is what I'm going to do," right? Or I have a partner that actually is coming out there from the community and is supporting them. That's huge. Or I'm working with spiritual care, for example, NIDUS, New York Interfaith Basis and Services, and we'll go together and they're able to provide that support, right? So those are huge pieces. And then on the recovery, it gets even better because we're going to give the assistance that we give, but then we work with the city of New York to then do referrals to HPD, Housing Preservation Development. But we will call Salvation Armies, hey, can you give us, help us support with some clothing? And we call a local partner, hey, who can be the best unit partnership or best group that can help them in a specific thing. So it is a huge component in all parts of the cycle, right? And I think as the Red Cross, and one of the things that our leadership right now is talking about is this community mobilization model, where we're saying we need to be in the community. And part of that is the partnership, right? That supports the entire cycle.
Yeah.
And I'd just like to say that one thing that the FDNY is big with bringing to the disaster, to the people, is that many firefighters are experienced. The alarm teams that we have, probably minimum years with the department, 20, some guys said 35, even 40 years with the fire department. They talk from experience. You guys are great. The volunteers are out there doing the installs, but many have not experienced the fire firsthand. They don't know exactly what to say. But when you have firefighters that are talking from experience, and we are manned with firefighters from throughout the city who have seen many, many different things. No two fires are alike. They talk from experience. It kind of falls a little better on the ears of those who may need an alarm. Maybe they don't think they do, but they hear a war story, so to speak. They hear about something that we have experienced, and they'll be more apt to sign up for alarms and maybe realize that, yes, maybe they are important. So that's a big component that we add working with you as partners that really goes a long way. And that's not something you could get from just anybody. It does happen with the FDNY and the experience of the FDNY.
And Marty, I'm wondering specifically, we just did a Sound the Alarm event this year in Peekskill. It's a community that we're focusing on because they tend to have more fires than some of the neighboring communities. People may not be as able to recover from a fire as quickly. So, and we had a wonderful event. We had, I don't have a count, but probably hundreds of people out spanning the community. And I think you were an integral part of organizing that. Can you just sort of speak about that Sound the Alarm event and generally sort of that effort?
Absolutely. And you can't you've heard it here, you can't really do those events or even go out to the community without the partnerships, without partners, because they, represent so many groups that we don't necessarily represent. If it's Spanish speaking, if it's other organizations that can reach out to the community and be a trusted leader for the community, we can partner with them, and then they can start to trust us, and they can go along with us to installation. So on that day, we had, a significant portion of the team was like 130 people. I think over half was Mira, and Mira's enthusiasm and just drive to reach out to the community, whether it's their community that they're supporting or others within the community, is terrific. So they have an infectious, nature, and they make you feel like you're part of Mira, as we hope that they're part of the Red Cross. And it was a great event, and I think we were able to get out to. It was pouring that day, all day, and I thought, leaving my home, I thought, well, maybe half the people will show up of the 150 that signed up. I think 140 turned up. So we were out in the rain. People came back, they were drenched, but they came back and they said, we did 15 homes. And they were excited about what they did. They were excited about supporting a community that, like you said, has a significant number of fires. And it helps to support the recovery. It helps to get, as Dario said, trust. So they really start to trust us, and then we can partner with those organizations. And even if we don't have them with us, they know that they're supporting us. So it's very important.
Yeah, and I think so. As we get into the conversation, I sort of, in my head, I'm thinking about the different phases of the disaster cycle: response, recovery, preparedness. I don't know where you're supposed to start in the cycle, but cycle. So specifically focusing on disaster response and partnerships in the disaster response. Let's start with just sort of your perspective, like, and Jerry, let's start with you as a firefighter. Sort of, what is your role in a disaster situation? How do you triage? Like, what is your approach? How do you approach that situation from the firefighter perspective?
Each disaster, of course, is different, so it depends on what's going on. I've been in the firehouse for 26 years, and the big thing is to see if you could prep to the event. Each one's different. So the main thing is to have manpower. Make sure my guys are available. Stay by your phone because we may need extra guys. We may need extra rigs. Make sure the rigs are fueled up. That way, if power goes out, we have fuel filled. We have the fire rigs filled up with fuel. I'm not involved with other bigger parts of the FDY, like the IMT, Incident Management Team, or the disaster team. They're more involved with disaster preparedness. I'm more on the home level, and maybe after the fact where there is a disaster, each firefighter is CFRD trained, some of them more than that. We do the basic medical conditions, airway management, bleeding control, stuff like that. So we just pretty much in the beginning make sure we're available to be there, on duty and off duty. I've responded to disasters off duty, as many firefighters have. As they say, firefighters are on duty 24/7. So we're always there for the people, we're there for each other, and that's it. After the fact, the big boys call the shots. They tell us where they want us. I get my members, we respond, we do what we have to do, whether that be medical or otherwise. Fire department does everything. A lot of people don't realize that. Hurricane, we're cutting down trees. We want to make sure people could get out of their houses. We want to make sure the roads are clear for emergency vehicles to get down those roads, stuff like that. So it's pretty involved. Once again, each disaster is a little different, and I'm led by my leaders, right? They tell me what to do, and I give orders to my members, and we make sure the task at hand gets done.
I'll tell you, the line "every disaster is different" has been repeated. I've been here a little over a year, and that is, I feel like every day somebody says that. So Joe, I think one of the amazing things that you've done with the Red Cross is deployed to major disaster. If I remember correctly, you've been AD of operations. And so from that perspective and sort of the major incident disaster response, what is your, like, how do you approach your role? How do you triage? Has your role changed like over the years as you've sort of grown and experienced and the landscape has changed?
I would say it definitely changed, right? As you learn more and as you get out in the field and you start to do some of these, deployments to the disasters, and you work through different activities at these disasters, you get different perspective, and certainly it helps when you've got one of the best in the business teaching you how to do it, sitting down there on the end over there, Mr. Diaz. But no, when I go in as a AD, the Assistant Director of Operations for one of the large scale disasters we do, you've got to first start with, I think the key thing on initiation, as it's, actually happening now, is such as what's going on in Florida. It's really doing that assessment, right? So do I have the manpower? Do I have the capacity? Do I have the people? Do I have the resources? Where are they? We've got to get eyes on them to know, right, what we're looking to get done. I think that communication, while communication is always the big thing, it's even more important in that initiation phase when things are a little chaotic and a little hectic and you've got to pivot and turn on a dime. So, doing the size up, understanding what the task is in front of you, and making sure that the resources and the communications are aligning to that helps to keep you, as they say in the industry, right, in front of the job. Because I've learned that you don't want to get behind in the job, and that's not a good place to be. And so we practice that, and it's part of the readiness that we do, and we prepare for that. But then when you actually get out there, it can be nerve-wracking, right? You're thinking about the safety of the workforce that's out there. You're thinking about all the things that could or can't go wrong. You're thinking about, your responsibility for all of these people. I mean, it's akin to setting up a corporation in 24 hours, right? With all the activities of supply chain and procurement and finance and, HR and all of that, with 1,500 people who never worked with each other before. And we do it so well that it's amazing.
And Marty, I'm wondering, you have a sort of different perspective, and you just as a DAT responder, somebody, and in particular in Metro New York North, where you guys are responding from home, if I'm not mistaken, a lot of the time. Sort of, how does your experience? What is your role on that? How do you approach that situation? Sort of from the disaster action team member response.
So it involves a lot of the things that Joe just said, which is kind of assessing the scene, kind of taking action appropriately, because sometimes you don't want to act too fast, but you want to make sure you're responding to the client's needs. You're gathering information from the fire department, from the police department. You're maybe waiting for apartment management to come in and provide some more information. So you're always kind of balancing. I'm trying to get all the information, but you're not going to get all the information. You get most of the information, and then you've got to work with the clients. They're in a very traumatic situation. It could be very traumatic for the volunteers also. They're going out on a DAT call. So you always want to have that situational awareness. How is my team doing? How is my team responding? And there are a lot of resources at our disposal. There's other Red Cross resources, there's fire department resources, the OEM has information. So you want to make sure that you're not acting alone. You can talk to the duty officer, there's a manager on call. So there's always others that can help you through these situations and try to make it easier for you. And you have to also watch out for your own well-being to make sure you're considerate of how long have I been on this? Am I getting tired or worried? How's this affecting me? Good question.
Wondering if nothing comes to mind, but if we can go down the row and just sort of, can you think of a time in a disaster response where a partner has played a vital role in that response? And Dario, I know you have a story queued up. You're welcome to use the same story, or you can, anyone, but let's start with Dario and come back this way.
Just a quick point there, right? So we're talking about partnerships. When it comes to a response, just want to add something there. Keeping in mind that every day in our line of work, we're either providing services or we're working on readiness to provide services, right? So we're building plans alongside with FDNY, New York City Emergency Management, Rockland County Emergency Management, any other counties are working. We're preparing, we're getting ready for responding, right? So again, that's another example of partnership. So then when we actually respond, everything has been laid out and we all know our role, right? We know that this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to do it. And of course, there'll be new nuances that will come into it, right? There were so many instances where, to your piece there on where partnerships have played a role, right? I'll give you an example. One, Hurricane Florence, we're working Hurricane Florence. And this was a big operation. We had to think about 200 shelters in North Carolina. And we needed to get out there and distribute supplies because people were affected by a lot of flooding. And there's a partner that we actually have also here in New York, is LAC Carry. It's a group that actually It's in Harlem in New York, but actually it's throughout the East Coast in different areas. It's actually, they're international as well. And we needed individuals to help us distribute, but also distribute in the right locations. These individuals a lot carry, they lived in the communities. So not only they help us distribute, but they help us get to the right people, right? Help us to get to the right neighborhoods, the people that actually are vulnerable, the people that are affected, because they knew the community. They help us identify, hey, this is one of the churches that actually is the center of the community, or this is the community center that is the center of the community, and they help us distribute there. So that's a huge example of how partnerships are so beneficial. And then so what we do now is, Black Carry is part of our planning, right? The union group, I'm sorry, the Teamsters, for example, is another group that during Sandy, they showed up here and said, Dario, what do you need to move? And they showed up, right? And then since then, or actually before then, but since then, that's a group that I keep in mind that we have to continue to include in our partner, in our planning process, right? Whenever we were talking in an exercise last night about if there's no storm and we cannot move supplies, well, the county emergency manager agency can help us move the supplies, right? So you see how partnership is crucial, not only in the response, but in order for us to do a good job in the response, we plan ahead of it. We do readiness together, all of us together.
Jerry, if you have any stories, yeah, it's a question.
I just say, of course, one of the worst disasters that we've experienced, 9/11, that's where the victims, actually the rescuers, the responders became victims to themselves, not just that day, but over the months. And the Red Cross was unbelievably instrumental during that time with feeding us, giving us shelter, handing us a blanket, and more importantly, emotional support. I mean, the Red Cross was unbelievable and got us through when we needed them most. They were there for us, they were there for the rescuers, the responders, which, it doesn't get better than that.
Marty, Joe?
Thanks. So I think what I would talk about is, as far as the response and partnerships, we have a organization in Rockland County that Joe introduced us to, Havarim, who responds to fires. They have an organization that's about 140 volunteers that we've partnered with. So we're working with them also to be helpful on the response side, but they've also been very helpful on the installation of smoke alarms. And they're an organization that is connected to the Hasidic community, and they've really given us entree to that community. It's a community that looks to people within the community to support them. So they've also, just having them with us, they've gotten to know the Red Cross, and now I think we can start going out to that community without necessarily having the Havarim with us. But they've done an excellent job, and they provide, again, support to whether you're Hasidic or not. They'll provide emergency management support to the entire community in Rockland County.
Yeah, Ned, I just want to drive the point home on the partnership piece, right? These partnerships transcend just the readiness and the preparedness stuff that we do. And if you look across the partnerships that we have, right, FDNY deploys a number of individuals out into disasters to do logistics and distribution of emergency supplies and other things with us, right? If you look at our corporate partners, MasterCard's a good example of that. They work with us, they train in Blue Sky, they do all these training and readiness. And I've been on many deployments where I've seen the same MasterCard people come down, right, to another state to help us run shelters and go out in the community and do that. And so, again, those partnerships, you leveraged across that whole cycle is just instrumental to the work that we're doing.
And I just want to take a moment to a little comment in the chat I wanted to share. Amar says, Joe is awesome at conducting major home fire campaign events here in Long Island and greater New York area. We've learned a lot, great motivator. So I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge you have a lot of admirers. I think one more question on the response and we'll move to recovery. Are there lessons that you've taken from partners where maybe there was something that you hadn't really considered in your work, in your direct role, but you noticed a partner doing it or approaching it in a certain way? Is there a lesson that you can sort of think of that you've taken? And I don't know, should we start with Joe and then go back that way?
Sure. I will tell you that there were a lot of input from partners, especially when we started the home fire program. You know, in the early days, trying to figure out what the program looks like, how does it operate. We had a lot of great suggestions from our volunteers and from our partners, and we took those on board and incorporated them in some of the processes and procedures that we do. And we had some great ideas that came to us that, you know, didn't really, you know, pan out, right? We had people saying, hey, why don't we do a mail campaign, right? We can do a mail order for your smoke alarm, take a picture, send it back, right? That sort of thing. And we experimented with a lot of those things, but I think a lot of great ideas come from those partners. And sometimes it's trial and error, and other times that you can see the real, you know, efficiency and productivity that those ideas bring and just incorporate it.
Yeah, just to follow on that, through FDNY, there's been a lot of support in the program, the preparedness education that we provide during the home fire campaign visit. So we've got the lithium battery sheet, which explains you know, how to treat lithium battery chargers, and a lot of people just aren't aware of that. Their device might get hot, and they just don't know how to handle that. And then also, just as part of the preparedness training that we do, or the discussion that we have about fire safety, we've learned a lot from the FDNY and other partners about fire extinguishers. So we talk to the residents, clients about fire extinguishers and proper handling of the fire extinguisher, and we'll check them. And we had one the other day, and I think I was out during one of the sound the alarm events. I think the date on it was 1981. So, and they weren't aware, and it was a big, heavy fire extinguisher that there was difficulty going down to the basement and bringing it up to where we were looking at it. So there's a lot of learning, a lot of education that we've learned from partners that we can incorporate, as Joe said, into our program.
Can say that a lot of firemen, the kind of rough and tough kind of guys, all of them cannolis, hard on the outside, emotional on the inside, soft. A lot of times we think, you know, the fire's out, we did that thing, okay, it's over. And it's not over until those people are good. And I think from the Red Cross, we all learned, the fire department, anyhow, the importance of emotional support. So, you know, once the fire's out, we do have to support them emotionally, which we have done. I've gone personally to houses, put out the fire one day, we're there, the next day checking on them, making sure they're good. So something that simple as compassion, you know, bring it to the table. That's something I learned from you guys.
Two areas to highlight here. Number one is there are groups like the VOAD organization, Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster. We are part of the New York City VOAD, Long Island VOAD, Rockland County, Westchester County. These are groups, these are umbrella organizations where you get a lot of the disaster relief or involved organizations together, and they're talking. One of the areas that I've learned a lot in this past couple of years is the New York City VOAD, for example. They will bring different organizations and talk about what they do, and particularly in the space of inclusion and cultural differences and learning how to properly serve communities, right? So food, for example, is a big area. There's nothing more comforting than getting the food that you are used to, right? So I'm a Dominican, rice and beans. You know, you give us a plate of rice and beans, we're happy, right? So having those groups together, talking about, hey, look, when you're working with this group, who may be a vegan group, vegan is different from vegetarians, and this is what it is, and this is what a salad is, not a meal, right? So you learn from each other. So I will say for us, Lily, one of the advantages being part of this umbrella group is with the New York City VOAD, is learning about what are the different groups doing, but also telling us a little bit about how communities interact and how do they work and what do they need. Right. That is one. But also, I think every day when we go out to communities and we work a fire, for example, there was a fire some years ago, January, I think it was 2022, in the Bronx, where we lost quite a few individuals there. It was a Gambian community, I believe, there that we were working with. They taught us a lot about servicing that community, right? So it was a partnership that was formed right there on the spot, but it was very important. We learned a lot, right? So it's actually paying attention to the community, who are the organizations that are serving that community, and then connecting with them so we can do a better job, again, together to serve people.
And I think just sticking with Dario real quick, let's move into the recovery phase of the cycle.
Yep.
And Dario, yeah, I think there's no better person to explain what's the difference between the recovery phase and the response phase. Sort of how do you know when you've moved into the next phase?
Yeah, so again, one of the things that happens in the disaster, it's like a parallel universe. My predecessor used to say that, right? So you go into this new world where things are just no longer the same. They're not equal. They're not normal. They're not. You don't have that same routines, right? So that's what the disaster does to you. It just changes everything. I think once you start going into this, and I'm just simplifying a little bit, you start going to a more normal place, right? Understanding what that is. So, for example, COVID, we all dealt with COVID. That was a craziness. But then we started getting to the new normal for a little bit. This hybrid environment where we actually now do this. Before it would be a room full of people, right? So when you start getting to that place, you start talking about recovery, and the idea is getting people back to a normal. And the normal may be a little different, and that's okay, right? And at that point, the recovery piece is how do we get people to the next step? And there are agencies that do a better job at it because that's their expertise. So it's not that somebody is bad or good. It's just that some focus on that. So that's when you then step in and you bring other partners, right? So for example, Catholic Charities of New York, they are very good in the recovery side, right? They're very good to do the casework. In the VOAD, for example, there are committees that talk about recovery. So the committees that talk about response, right? So then you start involving different individuals. Here's about how do we get them back to normal. So in the everyday, we have a fire department does their business. Clients are displaced. Unfortunately, we then go ahead and support them through that response. But then now they need to get back to a normalcy, right? Getting an apartment. So maybe he's connecting them with the right partner that can support them with that, whether it's the city of New York or somebody else, is now maybe recuperating some clothing, right? So those are the things you start now recovering. In other words, how do I get back to and I'm calling it a new normal, right? That's what I'm doing. This is a little bit of an opinion here, because I don't think the normal that it was is the same, right? But you're getting back to a new normal, and I think that's the recovery. And again, I think this is probably one of the areas where I see the partnerships shine the most, right? Because we are there. The Red Cross, our job is primarily, in the beginning of a response, and then we do some recovery, and then we have other steps that we support people. But in generally, we then depend on other partners to step in and support. Again, city partners, we're fortunate here in New York City, great partners. On some of the counties like Westchester, we have great partnership with the Department of Social Services as well. They'll come out, they'll meet with the client, start talking about their next steps, right? So that's I hope that answered your question, because I went dancing everywhere.
Yeah.
The new norm is a good phrase, and that would be it, because people want to get back to where they were. Unfortunately, a lot of them can't get to that same exact spot, but we can make things better. So something as simple, well, not simple, but something like a fire, something as simple as getting them a meal. I've gone out with the guys, we've shopped a meal, dropped it off at their new location when, it's within our response area. We've done that numerous times just to let them know that they're cared about. People care about them, and try to get to that normal thing where they can enjoy a meal with their family. Go out after fire. We have kids, their Christmas presents are no longer there. They're under the tree that is gone on fire. We'll go out, we'll take a little collection from the firehouses, collect some money, go shopping for presents, help them reach that new norm. It's that simple, but it's something meaningful, and I know a lot of people very appreciative of it. And we do it when we can. We can't do it for every victim, but when we can do it, we try to do that.
And go ahead, Marty.
Just following up on the new normal. A lot of people are reluctant to ask for services. They're reluctant to ask for help during the recovery phase. So I think part of what we do is try to connect them with the organizations and let them know that these people are there to help and provide services, and that they're entitled to these services. And again, they're sometimes reluctant to ask for help. And so I think that's another part of what we do, is advocate for the clients and try to connect them with these organizations that we know can provide services and provide help.
Joe, I'm wondering if you have sort of a perspective, especially from a large scale disaster. I know a lot of, and maybe I'm wrong, when you're doing operations, when you're on a large response, when does that recovery phase start after a hurricane or a wildfire or one of those bigger disasters?
Yeah, I mean, it starts right away, right? I mean, once the people get into the shelter when they're evacuating, right, and the disaster is, is striking, and you're in that operational mode, their first thought is, well, what am I going to do now? And so that's where, from an operations standpoint, right, we start to look at some of our volunteers who do the shelter resident transition, the SRT folks, right? They're the ones who are going to help figure out, how does this person, what's the barrier for them to get out of the shelter? Where is it that they're going to go, and how are we going to help them get there? And then how can we connect them with even more recovery services? So, even in the early stages of a disaster, we are operationally thinking about, let's start, of course we're gonna recruit shelter workers in, and everybody, feeding people right away. But literally, as they get on planes and start getting, on the ground, right behind it are going to be those caseworkers and those SRT folks who are going to come in and help.
Yeah, and just cognizant of time, let's switch into the preparedness phase of the cycle. And I think this is really where a lot of the work that you and Marty and FDNY do, specifically around home fire. So how do you approach that conversation with people? And it's when you have a disaster happen, you're really receptive to the messaging, but a lot of the work that we do is trying to reach people who maybe aren't thinking about it. So Marty, how do you approach that conversation with people about preparedness when maybe that's not what they're ready to think about?
So I think generally, in the midst of the fire and the disaster, when you're at the fire scene, you're generally not asking questions about, do you have smoke alarms? Do they go off? But you're kind of looking around, maybe if you're in their home and you're maybe making an observation. But then we often have a program, if there's a significant incident or event, we'll work with community partners and go back to that neighborhood and do a canvassing of that neighborhood. So after action, there's another name, rapid response. So we'll do a rapid response. And we had one recently in New Rochelle when there was a fire. It was a tragic fire. And we were joined by the New Rochelle mayor. We were joined by the fire chief. We were joined by someone from the city council. And then we canvassed that neighborhood for a couple hours. And I'll tell you, the response when the mayor knocked on the door was much better than my percentage. I was telling the mayor that my percentage was like down to 2%. Her response rate was about 75%. So when they saw the mayor, they came out, they embraced the mayor, they were happy to see the mayor, and it was just great to see that support for the program. And the mayor was very involved with us when we did Sound the Alarm in New Rochelle, and will support us in the future. So that was, a great way to, partner and get out there and try to reintroduce the program to the community.
And Jerry, I think you also have a good perspective on this. We see your trucks out in the community at a lot of events. Do you are you targeting specific areas that have had major fires? Sort of how do you approach getting that preparedness message into communities?
Definitely targeting certain areas that seem to be a little more active with fire duty. But the big thing we do is if there's a fatal fire, we go there for a fatal fire campaign, fatal fire within city limits. It paints a better picture when there's a burnt building and people could look and we say we lost 2 kids in that building. Then it becomes real. You could talk all you want. Some people believe they are immune. I always say fires do not discriminate. It's not just the rich, it's not the poor, it's not the uneducated. It happens to any one of us. In fact, 3 firemen from my firehouse had fires. Okay, 2 houses burnt to the ground. The other guy had over $100,000 worth of damage to his basement. So fires do not discriminate. The best thing is for people to see, there it goes. That's what happened last night. They were smoking in bed. They left the candles on, whatever it was. It becomes real. You could talk all you want and people will walk right by you. But when it is a fatal fire, we'll show up. We have a media truck. It's 2 big screens on the side of a truck. We'll set up a table. We have at least 2 members there, possibly 3, depending on the area. We hand out smoke alarms. That's the only time we actually hand out smoke alarms. We'll hand out smoke alarms to the people, hand out literature, answer questions, and stress the importance of having these alarms. 60% of those fire fatalities, did not have working smoke alarms. That's a big number. So there's a good chance those people may have been saved. So the thing is to get out there and educate them. Once again, education alleviates panic, alleviates fear. We talk about the 3 Ps. We talk about the prevention, prevent what you can. If you smoke in bed, that's a fire you could prevent. If your neighbor next door smokes in bed, you don't have a lot of control over that, right? But prevent what you can, have a plan, practice that plan, especially with the kids. Do fire drills at home. The kids never do fire drills at home, but they're more likely to get hurt at home, right? So you have to have a plan. Always have 2 exits. You know, the smoke alarm program is great. We used to just hand people smoke alarms, and they were happy to have it. And many people put in their drawer because their son's coming over next weekend and he's going to put it up, and it's in a drawer for 2 years. Or people would take it, put it up in a kitchen, which is a big mistake. It becomes a nuisance. They think it's defective. They throw out that smoke alarm. So we no longer hand people smoke alarms. The only time would be a fatal fire. That's why the program was so great, because we get there and, you know, one thing we do is put them in the right spot, of course, right? And we're going to check the apartment within limits, you know, with their permission. We're going to check the exits, make sure they're not blocked. You know, make sure they don't have too much clutter. Make sure they don't have overloaded outlets. This is all important stuff. This is all prevention. And so it's not just putting up a smoke alarm and saying, see you later, and off to the next one. We spend 20 minutes in each apartment going through the booklet, talking to people, letting them know the importance of, you know, not overloading your outlets, of being able to access the fire escape. You know, many apartments we go to are disasters, and we're not there for any violations or anything like that. We're there to educate and let them know of the importance of getting your place squared away, getting those alarms up, and having a plan and practicing that plan.
Great. And I think we're coming up on the end and want to save some time for questions. So we'll go start at Joe and go down to Dario. What is in your go bag at home?
That's an interesting question. You know, I've got a lot of the normal stuff in there, but there's also a Ziploc bag with a little USB drive with a couple of PDFs of some of the important documents that I want to have. And there's also another Ziploc bag that's got about $200 worth of small bills in cash, right? Because a lot of times when you're in these disaster areas, right, no electric, ATMs aren't going to work. You're not going to be able to use your credit cards or anything like that. So make sure that those are in there as well, in addition to some of the normal things that that our great marketing team goes and lets us know what should be in there.
So I just learned a lot right now. But what I have in my go bag, probably a copy of my credit cards, which may not work, but some cash, not that much, but and also I have a lot of chargers. I'm always worried about having to charge my phone. I may not even have my phone, but have charging devices in there that are fully charged. Medications, need medications, a flashlight, and I'll talk to Joe after this and have more in my go bag.
My to-go bag is very simple. It's just some important documents that I may need, and it's that simple. So
Dario, I'm almost scared to ask what's in your go bag. I feel like you have a whole crate.
Nothing. I just have gum and things like that. There's
Just a
nothing in it.
MacGyver kit.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand, you know, the basics, you know, and I think that those are things that have been mentioned, right? So you talk about your medicines, your copies of your documents, some money, right? Because again, you want to be able to do some things. Telephone numbers of key individuals, right? In case your phone's is left behind. You know, even if it's not the medication, having copies of your prescriptions, so then you can get again, the Red Cross, one of the things that we will do is we support you in that process of getting medications through our health services volunteers, who are amazing, right? So there's a lot of those things, and I would recommend you to go to the redcross.org website to see. I'm learning. No, go to the redcross.org website. I know the FDNY also talks about this, right? Having that kit put together, but also then there's the personal piece that each of us is important. So for example, for me, I work disasters. So for me, I have a battery pack and another battery pack and then computer. So I think what the key to that is not only what you're going to have because the Red Cross or fire department tells you, but then sit down and look at what are those things that you need. And then there's different type of scenarios that you got to think about, right? And look about what are your risks, right? So if you live in a flood zone, it's a different component versus, you know, a fire type of thing. So looking at it holistically and say, I may be dealing with this type of disaster, so then I should have these things, right? I'm gonna, if I ever go to Joe's house, I'm gonna look for that Ziploc bag, get this $200. But you know, that's the type of stuff. I'm just being funny. That's the type of stuff you got to think about, right? But I think it's important that we look at that. Uh, Phone numbers, like I said, I think it's a key one. My wife, for example, always telling me how I need to have my mom's prescription list so I know it is in case you got to talk to the doctor, right? So those are the things we have to look at. But again, I recommend you to go redcross.org, and you can get that information. It's a really important piece.
Great. So we're gonna move into the question phase. I have one from the Zoom chat. Feel free to drop more in the chat, or if you're in the room, there's a microphone up at this chair. The cord is not long enough to move to you, so you should come up to it. So this probably goes to Marty or Joe. From Barbara, could you describe how the sound the alarm forms are processed, particularly in Metro North and Long Island? I hope you understand what forms they're talking about, because I don't.
Let me take it. So the SAF forms. So we do have a form that we fill out when we go visit a home. So we ask a number of questions, and it's important to communicate to the client these questions and these answers only stay within the Red Cross. You know, people are kind of concerned about, well, what are you going to do with this information? And often they won't even sign up for the program if they have to fill out a form or answer some questions. That's why it's so important to have the partner organizations support us and explain, you know, what the purpose of these forms are. But it gives us information of how many people are we serving, how many alarms are we putting in, and the forms get ultimately entered into a system and then entered into there's a local system and there's a national system. So we track all that information. And that's also how we, if there's a life saved, ultimately, it'll go back to that information. If we've responded to a fire or there is a fire in a certain area, and we can track it back to where we've installed smoke alarms or FDNY has installed smoke alarms, then it gives us an opportunity to further investigate that and validate that that was, you know, a life saved.
Great. Are there any questions from the room or in the chat? I see Maria bravely stepping up to the mic. And when you at the mic, just your name and then jump to the question. This is a production.
Hello?
Yeah.
All right. So my name is Maria Anguiano. Great to see you all. So we always talk about the mission moments, right? But what has been a challenge in any situation throughout your years that turned out to be a mission moment? Because I know, like you said, every event is different, every fire is different, but has there been a challenge, opportunity, or situation that turned out to be a very, mission moment?
Jerry, if Red Cross, we call mission moments sort of like the reasons why you keep doing what you're doing.
For myself, definitely, there's nothing better than walking out with someone from a fire, pulling someone out, especially the young. And I've done that. I've done it with many walks of life, but there's no better feeling, and that's why I'm here. You know, it's great helping people, but to help a kid that you know your action made a huge difference, there's no better feeling than that.
Does anybody else want to answer?
So I'll tell you a quick story, and since we're talking about partnerships, so I think this is the good one, and Ned knows about this. We just put a little thing on Facebook about Hispanic Heritage Month, and that story it's summarized there. And what it was, when I was a caseworker, I had a lady come speak to us, Red Cross caseworkers. Make sense. Any problem, let's bring it to them and see what happened. And this individual was actually being physically abused by a relative. And she wanted to leave that home and travel down south. She just needed a bus ticket. And that's not something we do, right? That's not something we get engaged in normally, right? So it was a challenge. And I felt, we felt, because it was just me, but the team, we were working together, we felt that we needed to do something, and, short of just pulling out the cash and just giving it to her, we were able to contact a partner group in Hudson County, New Jersey, that actually was supporting individuals that were being physically abused. And we were able to get that ticket for the client. And I told Ned the story that what ended up happening, this lady had a 8-year-old kid with her the entire time. And every time she came, because again, we were trying to work this, her case and all stuff. And I remember, she would cry, the lady, 'cause she wanted to really get out of the situation she was in. And the kid just came and gave me a hug on my leg because he was short. He said, "Thank you for not making my mommy cry," right? So he talked about mission moment, right? He really meant thank you for helping her, and then now she's gonna be happy, right? But that was a challenge that we would normally not work on. And our leadership in the Red Cross, many of you know, Brad Kaiserman talks about this getting to yes. And the yes is not necessarily that you're going to do 100%, whatever that is, but it's actually working with others to get to that yes. And I think that to me is an example. And those of you that know me, I wanted to be an FBI agent when I was young and wanted to follow the really bad people. I wanted to be a profiler and all that stuff. And it's those moments that just made me forget about the FBI for a second. And I'm like, oh, wait, hold on a second. I've been doing this for 20 years. I should have been with the FBI. What happened? But it's those moments that did it.
Joe or Marty?
Glad that Dario picked us over the FBI. So thank you.
We have a comment in the chat from Margaret. It says, "We are amazing. I assume we as the Red Cross attend a preparedness presentation, and we will show you what you need in a go bag, one for everyone, including pets." So we do, as an organization, we do a lot of this work, getting out in the community, helping people think through their preparedness plans. And there are a lot of amazing volunteers that do a lot of amazing work in helping sort of bring that information to the people. And I'll tell you, having seen it, like whether they're talking to a room of one person or a room of 100 people, it's the same level of excitement and enthusiasm. And it's just really unbelievable to watch our volunteers and our Red Crossers do their thing. So are there any other questions in the chat or in the room? Wiki?
Hi, and thank you guys for sharing. Because you're here, I have to ask this question to soak this knowledge up while we can, right? 1890, I think the smoke alarm was created, right? Incredibly so long ago, right, in our time, but yet so many people still don't have it, right? And we are doing that part in the Red Cross today that leads more toward equity and inclusivity. We love the fact that New York City gets to be a part of this story. I would love to hear how you feel like the story will continue. What's the future of preparedness and with our home fire program and related to partnerships, right? Community and what you can share on how we're going to keep this going and probably still be the first in that story, like the innovators. We're not Thomas Edison, I get it. So he had something to do with the initial part of that. But are robots in there or what is it? What's the future? Thanks.
Well, it's an interesting question, Wiki. I think, from the home fire program and preparedness side of things, certainly those things are going to continue. People are going to continue to need to be prepared to help themselves be a little bit more resilient. I think what you'll probably see, and you're already starting to see, is that technology is going to play a bigger role in that. The example of that is we have some new smoke alarms that are coming from Kitty that have new standards and new specifications in them, and they can determine whether it's a cooking smoke or a material fire smoke, right? And the purpose of it being able to do that is really to try to eliminate those nuisance alarms that Captain Rocco was talking about before, right? When you burn your chicken cutlets and the alarm goes off and you take it down and you put it in the freezer, and then when we show up, you hand it to us and say something's wrong with it, right? So I think you're going to see, technology continue. I think in preparedness as a whole, if you look at the Red Cross's, the 5-year vision that we have for us as an organization, the preparedness is going to be the tip of the spear. It's going to be, that thing in the community that's going to help build our brand of the Red Cross. It's going to help educate stakeholders in that community about our services and programs. It's going to create demand for those programs, right? Whether it's blue sky and nothing's going on and they want to do some Pedro in a school, or they want to do a home fire program. And then, ultimately maybe lead to some, demand for blood services or training and certification. And so I think, preparedness is going to continue to play, a big role in the cycle.
Yeah, and I will throw in just one more question from the chat from one of our response managers who I won't name. Could you also touch on the Red Cross state of continuous response and and Jerry, I don't know if you're sort of seeing this from the fire department side, but at the Red Cross, we have what, like probably at least three major operations going nationwide. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but just sort of this incessant state of constantly needing to be responding. So answer the first question or the continuous response, because Dario, I know, can answer the continuous response.
I'll answer the first question. It is unbelievable the technology that we're coming up with. It's a technological world, and the fire department is very involved with that. Beginnings that I remember as far as technology, probably 25 years ago, we came out with a thermal imaging camera. People did not like to invite us to their house because we go there and we rip the place up because we're chasing fire, right? Break into the wall, see what's what. They'd say the fire's downstairs, not realizing the fire's everywhere because it's in the walls. We're no longer breaking walls if we don't have to, right? We have thermal imaging cameras that we can actually see for those hotspots, look for those hotspots within the walls. That was big 25 years ago. It has since become advanced. The camera used to be like this. Only old timers didn't want to carry it. All right, the camera's down to a third of what it used to be, and it's a great tool, and I think all have embraced it. As far as robotics, we have a robot. The FDNY has a robot that's going to go in there. We have, say, a collapse zone. We're not going to send that guys in there if we don't have to, right? We'll send the robot in there, see, is it safe for us to enter? Are there victims in there? We have a robot that's submersible that could lift 300 pounds off the floor, off the ocean floor, so to speak, or the bay floor if we have a drowning victim. So that's something else. And the big thing is drones. We have drones now, right? So we have a drone unit where we could see the building all around, right? We could see the whole building. Within minutes, the drones go up and we could see where is the fire. We see it's blown out the front, but it's also blown out the back. Is it coming out of the roof? Where is it? Is it affecting the building next door? So technology has really taken off. And one of the biggest things that helps us could be Citizens app, because it's no longer a fire over there. I didn't hear about it, but with social media, everyone knows what's going on in this world. They could see the fire as it's going, right? With Citizens app, very, very important. It's more real. Everything's more real, and people find out about these fires a lot quicker. I've been at fatal fires where people have seen it on social media, and then they come to the scene because they want to say a prayer or something. So it's really incredible how far advanced we are with all this technology, how it has helped us. It is a plus. What I saw recently, which is, I think, an incredible step for the future, 911 calls are no longer just voice. They are video. So someone could take a video and send it to 911. This is a fire. It is burning. We know it's not a false alarm. We could actually see it, right? We could see people hanging from the windows. So those video calls are great. Somebody's beating up his girl on the street corner. They send a video. They know immediately there is a real issue. That is a tremendous technological advancement within the response of PD and FD.
Yeah, I'll connect that to the two questions because they relate to each other. I think talk about continuous response. When we talk about that, in the past years in the Red Cross, we've been talking about blue sky and gray skies, right? Gray and blue. And everybody's like, what is that? Blue skies are every day, right? So we have fires every day. That's just what's happening. Then you have this gray skies, the storm that's going to hit Florida tomorrow. That's gray sky, right? So we have a storm that's huge, could be hitting us a Cat 4, Cat 3 hurricane tomorrow in Florida. That requires a lot of resources. It's a gray sky because we're going to have to do some additional lift that we don't do every day, right? But what we're seeing in the past years is that disasters keep increasing. The number of billion-dollar disasters has increased by a lot. We're seeing that every day there's more disasters. And some people may say, well, that's because it's more social media and other stuff. No, the disasters are increasing. So because of that, I think that the Red Cross will continue to be in the preparedness business. I think based on the technology, based on the things we're talking about, we're going to have to adopt and do it differently based on resources and all that. But I think we're going to be in that space because I think it requires us to do two things. And these two terms are sometimes used interchangeably, but they are different. We're going to have to prepare people to take care of themselves during the disaster. The more people are prepared, the better the outcome is going to be. So, for example, when FDNY or the Red Cross goes and educates people about a plan to escape during the disaster, having those smoke alarms, it's a better likelihood that we're going to save some lives, right? So the outcome is better when we do that preparedness. But also, if there's a hurricane that affects 8 million people, 9 million people in New York City, right? The more people that are prepared, that have that kid with the $200 that Joe has, right? The more they're likely to take care of themselves, right? And then the fire department, the police department, emergency management, again, this is on Long Island, in Rockland, doesn't matter where you're at. They're going to have a little bit less work and be able to take care of those that are in most need, right? So that's the preparedness side. But then there's the readiness side, and that is us saying we're going to have to build better plans. We are going to have to ensure that we have things ready to go, right? Train more people, right? There is a book written by Kelly McKinney. Kelly McKinney is actually my predecessor here. So to me, he's one of the best emergency managers in the country. It's called the moment of truth, and there is some talks about the importance of people being prepared themselves, and I really believe in that. I think the preparedness of the people in this continuous response, and I didn't explain continuous response. Continuous response means that we're not having this gray and blue. Now we're just having all the time this gray skies. There's disasters every day. So we have Brian Gerber from our region. He's a mass care chief. In other words, somebody who deals with sheltering, feeding, and distribution of emergency supplies. He came home 2 days ago, and yesterday he went back to another disaster, right? Because they're just happening, and they're happening, and they're happening, and they're happening. So we have this continuous response. So that said, because of continuous response, I think we'll continue to do preparedness long term. How we doing will change based on what's been said, but we're going to have to do this. And I think the better people are prepared and the better we are ready, the better the outcome.
I think that's a very good way to finish out our panel. I want to thank all of you for joining our panel. I want to thank all the audience in person and virtual. And then we do have, I'm going to switch places with Wiki for a special surprise. But just before I leave, I just want to thank Joe and Marty and Jerry and Dario for all of your insights and experience. And thank you to everybody who tuned in. And here's Wiki.
Yes. We are so thrilled. I would like to ask Mr. Joe Spaccarelli to stand up with me to get recognized for all your service and work helping our community with preparedness and readiness. We will take photos officially, so everyone in the room, please do not leave because there will be plenty of photos. Ms. Desiree will not allow us to not take a lot of photos. But I'm going to ask Marty to read particularly a prepared notice message that came from National for you.
This is a prepared notice from Monica Owens Doyle, who's responsible for the preparedness, the HFC program nationally. So she put together a very nice notice to Joe. She's worked very closely with Joe, big fan, as is her whole team. So Joe, you're a remarkable team member and valued friend. Throughout your 10 years of leading the Home Fire Campaign program in the greater New York region, your team has served nearly 217,000 people, installed more than 228,000 smoke alarms, and installed more than 1,100 pieces of accessible fire equipment. More importantly, Joe is a thought leader for our broader Red Cross network. He routinely and generously shares his knowledge, lessons learned, and experiences. This peer support helps teams nationwide expand their reach and serve more people in need. Joe manages one of the most complex home fire campaign operations in the nation, but always has time for others, providing a sounding board for our national headquarters team and tactical assistance for other regions. Joe eagerly leans into innovation and leads by empowering volunteers. Congrats, Joe, on a well-deserved recognition and all that you, your team, and partners have accomplished together. With gratitude, the National Headquarters HFC Program Team. And the clipboard.
And the clipboard.
And I'm gonna ask and Captain Rocco and Dario to help present this wonderful plaque, or well, certificate from us, sorry, plaque. Dario, if you would like to, one of you can help us with that and read it if you want to out loud. Also, as well as the signed shirt that many of your team members who
Love it.
who are not able to be
Love
there
it.
was able to give you, and that is from FDNY as well. Yes.
Let's read it. This certificate is awarded to Joseph Spaccarelli. This certificate is awarded to Joseph Spaccarelli. Good. For his achievements in promoting home fire safety and emergency preparedness, as well as strengthening the relationship between the American Red Cross and the Fire Department of the City of New York.
Joe, did you want to say any words?
I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to all the volunteers, all the staff, all the partners that really pulled together to make this a reality. Thank you.
Of course, we want to thank our panelists. Going to try to do this. Grabbing. And Mr. Doomsday,
Thank
we
you.
appreciate you. Captain Rocco, I'm going to ask the Dario actually give you this with our regional.
Thank you, Dario. Thank you. Appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Great. We're closing out, but yes, thank you online, thank you in the room, and we'll see you next time. And we were there.
Thank you.